Hi, I'm Rachel Ash, also known as Rachel Chemise on my various social media. Please feel free to follow me on those if you want to see more of the type of content that you see here, but in still frame time. What we're doing today is we are sewing a chemise, which is actually what I'm wearing right now. I got really excited. I put it on when I was done, and so wow, we will go back in time right after this and see me starting it. Once I put it on, I didn't want to take it off because Victorian underwear is both really pretty and really comfortable. This comes from a pattern from the late Victorian period, and it is really an exciting pattern because it is adjustable. The sleeves actually can move off the shoulder. In fact, some of the patterns that I was looking into from that period, they even had ties at the top, which is what I did, so that they can be fully adjusted if you have a dress that has either low shoulders, like shoulders that go off the sleeves that go off the shoulder, or no shoulders or no sleeves, strapless. And I wanted to have the ability to adjust my chemise as well. So I have altered the pattern accordingly. Ultimately, enjoy. We will have fun. I hit the stand that the camera's on, so I hope that you did not get too much vertigo from that. And I will catch you while I sew. The Ladies' Chemise, 1889. So this came out of an actual ladies' journal. I'll have the link down below. And it comes with two pattern pieces. One of which I use, and one of which I don't, because I ended up replacing it with ribbons so that it would be more convertible. But they're both there in case you decide you want to use them. It doesn't really come with instructions. So here's basically what you do. You use pattern weights to hold down your thing because that's cool. And you take the measurement of the one edge and you go all the way down the side of what will be your pattern. In this case, 36 inches. And then you take from that top corner, I think it's marked with an A, and you find out from that corner how many inches to measure down, and you mark each of these markings, each of these measurements, all the way down that initial line. So that initial line is going to be basically your standpoint from which you make the rest of the pattern. I didn't really know how to do this before I started doing this pattern. This is my first one. Then from there, you're going to make parallel lines from each of those points that you made on the initial line. And they're going to measure out to those measurements on the left. So here you see me doing that. Now I'm going to those initial points and I'm making parallel lines to the measurements that I have made, that I have marked on the pattern. And I saw a small tutorial on how to do that as part of a larger video, so I will link that down below too, in case that also helps you. But because I saw that tutorial, I realized that it would be possible for me to do this, and that is opening a door for me to be able to do these antique patterns, and that's really exciting because I love experimenting and trying new things. From there, first thing I'm doing is just like clearing out and defining those measurements, and then I am connecting the dots and cleaning up that curve so that it's more of a nice smooth curve that I can use when I am making my cuts. After that, I am connecting the other dots. So this has turned out to be a really great starter pattern because it's really basic. There's just this one pattern piece. Again, the other piece I ended up not using. And it's cut on the fold, although you're not going to see me do that because of the fact that I decided that I didn't like any of my shots of me cutting the fabric. So they're not on this video. And honestly, I had to go through so much video to make this one video that I was really picky about what went in. And this is still almost a 30-minute video. But I did think this was a great starter piece. So if you want to, you can make this as easy or difficult as possible. And here's an example of me making it a little more difficult. So I've drawn this line and it's going to be a cut line, and I picked it up here on the chest area because I don't want the waistline to be too altered from where it should fall. So I am adding some length up here because when I did some trial pin tucks, I checked to see how much they took away from the length of the fabric. And I'm adding that length in to the top of my chemise pattern to make sure that I don't lose length from that area and then end up with a waist. Like you saw that the waist goes in a little bit, so I didn't want a waist that came too high on my body. So that is why I am adding this in a little bit up here to make up for that. So I just cut up high, measure the right amount, cut into the pattern, and now I'm taping that extra space in. If you wonder where I get my super fancy pattern paper, it is like the kids butcher paper from IKEA. And it's super cheap. I think it's like $2 for a roll, and I've had 2 rolls forever. So it's nothing. I think that one of the greatest things you can do to make your chemise pretty is to add lace and pin tucks. It's really accurate to the period, and in this case I started with insertion lace. Insertion lace is pretty easy, especially with insertion lace like mine, because it was small enough. It was only an inch thick. I didn't mind just putting it on top of the fabric and then cutting it away behind. So I didn't have to do any fancy math tricks in order to add it and change the pattern or anything along those lines. So it was pretty straightforward. I just laid it on top where I wanted it. I aligned it using my self-healing cutting mat to make sure that it was straight across the pattern. And there you go. I have it attached right there. Here you can see it, and in between I'm about to add some pin tucks. Pin tucks have lots of uses, but first, really quickly, we're going to add them. I use again my self-healing cutting mat to make it easy for me to line up my lines. And here I show you that I had measured out that I really needed them to be about 3/4 of an inch apart in order to make them the length I needed. And then because I used a heat-based disappearing ink, I had to finger press them rather than iron them into place, and so I really pinned the heck out of them, but that's okay. One of the things I found with this particular fabric is it did not like sharp needles. It really needed a stretch needle or a ball-tipped needle, which was fine. This is why you check different types of needles with your fabric, because you'll find that different needles are best. And it's honestly good to change out your needles with different projects because they wear out. And you want to make sure that your needle is not the reason why things are going bad while you're trying to sew. So I just sewed 1/8 of an inch down each of my pin tuck lines and got these wonderful pin tucks. So aside from being pretty, which they are, and that's definitely why I added them to the upper part of my chemise, was just for decoration and design, because I thought that they would add a little bit of charm. They also can add a lot of body. So in a second here, you're going to see that I did this 3 times on top to make my 3 pin tucks on top, and then I add them again to the bottom of the skirt of the chemise. And I did this because here, not only again are they pretty, but they're going to add a lot of body. So pin tucks add body. They also use a ton of thread. So much thread. I ran out of thread. I had in my bobbin. I had to refill my bobbin. And then ultimately I ended up running out of thread and had to get new spools as well. I went through, I had like 2 half spools of white thread, and I thought there's no way that won't be enough for my projects. But it wasn't enough for my projects that I was going through. So, yeah, it turns out completely white projects use a lot of white thread. Who knew? So then I added another insertion lace thing to the bottom of the skirt, and because this lace is polyester, and sorry I can't find vintage lace that's affordable for me right now, it's stiff, and it also adds body to the bottom of the skirt. To get the nice, pretty, effective insertion lace, I carefully cut down the center with my fingers underneath to make sure I didn't cut the lace. And then, as you can see right here, I rolled the fabric carefully underneath and whip stitched it to the back. And this just let me really control the shape of the fabric behind it, so that it made these wonderful sort of shell pattern or wave pattern that matched the lace. That's really what I was looking for. I wanted it to match. And so here, eventually when I get back onto screen with it, I can show you how it looks when the entire thing is done. And you can see how the insertion lets you see completely behind the lace. The first thing I needed to do before I could put both sides of the chemise together was to iron both sides really, really well. So I whipped out my handy dandy iron that is super fancy. It really isn't. Okay, so moving on. Ironing pin tucks is kind of difficult. You have to do it in waves because you have to make sure that all of them are lying the same direction, and that can be really difficult. So it took lots of waves. And this time it was made further difficult because I was exhausted. I had gotten my second COVID vaccination and I was experiencing crazy fatigue. So you see me here taking a break. I am reading the American Duchess book. I am honestly working on like 3 different gowns in my head, although really components for just a couple of them right now. And so I took a reading break, and then I ironed the back of the pleats or the pin tucks, because I wanted to make sure that they were laying as smoothly as possible. So I iron both sides of the fabric and make sure it's as smooth as possible. And you see me doing that now. We're going to go up the chemise side. This is actually the front panel. And just make sure that it is as clean and ready to be matched as possible. This linen is nice and stretchy. It will make it really easy to match up the lace and the pleats of the pin tucks so that they're a continuous line from front to back. And I love that about that. That's what's wonderful about this stuff. It really does make it easier to match everything up. But it also means that it kind of shifts when you're sewing it. So it really needed like this resetting of the ironing before I started putting everything together in its final form. So that's what I'm doing. Plus ironing helped lay out all the hand sewing that I had done and made sure that it reset itself and smoothed out and laid really nice. And ironing just makes everything look nicer and prettier and better. Ironing is a good part of what you're doing. So then I put everything on to its place on the chemise. So here you have me matching up the edges of the lace. I've already matched up the pin tucks. And what I did to make sure that these stayed matched up as perfectly as possible is I forewent I forewent pinning, and I basted these edges together because I really did not want them moving on me. I made sure I did it within the seam allowance so that I could easily work around the basting later, and that way I could sew the seam allowance with the basting out of the way. In fact, I will cut away some of the basting because I'm going to make these French seams. So if it looked weird because I was matching it with the wrong sides together so that the right sides were outside, that's part of the step of a French seam here. French seams are seams that are made so that you tuck all of the loose ends into another seam. So if you start with the wrong sides together and the right sides out, almost like the finished garments put together with all the seams sticking out, and then you turn everything inside out and you put all the seam ends up with all the seams in a pocket. So now what I'm doing is cutting down those seams, and then I've turned the thing inside out, re-ironed it, and I am sewing back over the garment with all of the rough seams on the inside of this sort of little pocket I have made. There are lots of French seam tutorials online. You can find them. They are useful. And on a garment like a chemise or even any sort of underdressing, it gets lots of wear. So you want something like this to protect your seams. And here you go. I lined everything up as best I could. And I have mostly smooth lines between my front and back seams. Yay for adding ribbon and all the trimmings, but mostly ribbon right here. In fact, I got so excited about adding the ribbon that I put it in the insertion lace before I even turned on the camera. So that's already been done, but basically I just wove it in and out of the holes that were conveniently in the lace, as if the lace expected me to do that. I think it may have. This also doubles as a drawstring contraption for the chemise, which is really nice, and it looks really pretty. So I, all in all, am happy with it. When it comes to the shoulder straps, I found a few examples where they were replaced with ribbons. I like the idea. I've already gone over that in the introduction, but I just want to remind you, since it's been so long, just like it's taking me so long to fiddle with this and get it where I'm happy with it. But I finally have everything arranged how I like it, I think, and now I'm going to pin it again. Basically, I put a pin in the middle of the ribbon and a pin in the middle of the strap, and then aligned the middle of the ribbon with the middle of the strap, and then pinned the ribbon perfectly lined up with the edge of the strap, and then rolled it twice, and now I am pinning it again this way so that I can sew it. But I'm going to be really picky still, and I really think I left the entire length of this pinning process, maybe because I thought it would be educational, but possibly also to torture myself so I could watch myself fiddle with this with insane amounts of precision and just obsessiveness. So here we are. And I am like this. I mean, I've spent, 2 minutes just pinning this little bit of ribbon, which a normal person might have just rolled over twice and sewn by now, but not me. No, it needed to be perfect. But here I am finally sewing it. That's all I did, is I pinned it and I sewed it. And I did this to both straps. But don't worry, I'm not leaving the ribbon going out the side. First of all, it's not lined up. One of the things about being small-breasted is things don't usually fall where they need to. The original chemise setup was made for a larger breasted woman, and it would have actually hung under my breasts, which is not okay. So I had to raise it up a bit, and that required lowering the arm hole a little bit, which is what you see me doing right here. So I just had to adjust where the arm would fall. And then it's time to hem all of the top edges. So that's what you see me doing right here. I decided to do an 1/8 of an inch hem, and this type of hem is easy enough that I can really eyeball it, and seeing as you just saw me pin the heck out of this thing just to roll it over some ribbon twice, you know it's fairly simple because I'm just eyeballing it and sewing it. So that is what I'm doing just to get this thing set up. To help secure the ribbon, I've kind of came up with a way to fold it over here, and then I'm going to fold it again in a second, which we'll get to. And then fiddle with it a lot off screen to get this particular fold absolutely perfect again, because you know that that's really important, and pin this tip so that it doesn't move. But then I will sew it back down and get this 1/8 inch hem going around this other edge. And I'm going to talk again about this method when we get to the hem of the ruffles, so I'm not going to go into it a lot in a great detail here. But this is the hem that I do around the top edge of the chemise and then around the edge of the ruffle. I guess I could have hand hemmed it, but I didn't. This is an undergarment for one thing, and for another, I'm not real caught up on having to do hand sewing except where I feel like it's really necessary. From there, I moved on to ruffles. Oh my gosh, so much ruffle. I cut the width of the fabric 7 times. You can count them. I could count them with you, but I feel like you can count for yourself. So I'm going to trust you to do that. Then I attach the ruffles to each other by first seaming them, and then to make sure that the ruffles lay as perfectly as possible, I created a flat felled seam to make sure that the ruffles lay really smoothly. And I'm going to go further into flat felled seam in a different video. They are essential for lots of different types of sewing. And in this case, it just was the best way to get the ruffles. And then here is where I'm going to do my 1/8 inch hem again at the bottom of the ruffles, just to make sure they're super clean. So I do that same thing I did earlier where I just eyeball 1/8 of an inch rolled over at the end, and I actually stretched it a little bit so it would ruffle, and then I just roll that over, and because there's a little build up, it will want to roll for you and make a beautiful little hem. Isn't that nice and convenient and pretty? So I got that hem going, and I did it all along the length, and then I started gathering. I sewed 2 parallel seams, and I actually did something different this time. I did the basting stitches on both sides of where I would actually do my seaming stitch, so that my seaming stitch would go perfectly down the middle and get really great capturing of the gathers. And it worked really well. I think I'm going to do that again. It means that I remove the basting stitch that would be visible afterwards, but that's okay. And as I sewed, I was very careful to slowly double check that everything was laying perfectly. And you would think that means that everything went splendidly, nothing got caught up the way it wasn't supposed to, everything turned out great, but that's not true. As you see, there's a pin tuck right there, caught up in the seam. It was tragic, but not unfixable. That's what seam rippers are for. Actually, they're for lots of things, a whole lot of things, but also for ripping seams you don't want and need to fix. So I got out my seam ripper and I immediately took it to the seam that I needed fixing, pulled out that particular seam, and after I pulled out the seam, I lined the fabrics up again, pushed the pins in, sewed the fabric, and I ended up with a much better version of this ruffle. No more tucking the pin tucks into the ruffle. So it is a much cleaner thing. However, the ruffle doesn't lay the way I need it to lay anymore. So, anymore is the wrong word, yet. So, one more line of sewing is needed. This also helps secure the rough edges on the back of the ruffle. And after this, I'm basically done sewing the chemise. I am really excited about how this project's turned out. I love my new Victorian underwear. I am not completely done because a Victorian lady needs her bustle and bum pads, and I have not built that yet. But I have been really enjoying creating these things from actual extant patterns. Losing my sleeve. I have slopey shoulders. I am really excited that I'm building this set because I will be using it as the foundation for several different Victorian outfits, and you guys will hopefully get to see me build those. So I am looking forward to building those with you. I think these are really pretty. I think my chemise turned out really pretty, and I really love how it goes with my Victorian corset. That's what this thing is called. And stick around, check out this channel. I'm going to be producing more things at random. I'm sorry this video was so crazy long, but there were a lot more steps than I initially expected there to be in making my chemise. If you're interested in sticking around, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button to give me a boost, comment, and there's a little bell thingy or something that you can hit to hear when I post new things. And I will see you at the next video. Losing my sleeve. I have slopey shoulders. But that was really cool. Yes.
I mean, I can always restart, but once you thought of it down. Oh, okay. Will work.
I can figure out which one I should pull, right? This is fine. I did it! Yes! This is my first corset I could ever get out of by myself. I'm so proud of it. Every other one my husband has to get me in and out of. Here's one I can do. Not very well, but I can do it. For you ladies out there, get yourself a corset that you can do yourself. Oh, I should not hit that because it's got the camera on it. Let me think about my intro before I start recording. Okay, so